Hello.
Hello.
Welcome to part 2 of our jealousy videos. We hope that the first half was useful and interesting to you, and that this half will be both of those things as well.
With no further ado, here's part 2.
Enjoy!
Bye. Also on the subject of if I see you connecting with someone in some way and I project onto them a sense of having something that I don't. It's like moving in myself from a place of, because we're together, I need to be everything for you. And I need to be like, 9 or 10 out of 10 on every aspect. And then actually, if I see you connecting with someone who's like really charismatic or like, I don't know, like really successful in a way that I don't see myself as successful, then that really conflicts with that image of myself if I'm trying to be like all of these things 10 out of 10 to you, and that's where I get my self-worth from. It's always going to be an issue, right? And I think in our culture that is the model we're presented with.
Oh my god, so much, because we place so much emphasis on the romantic partnership, don't we, as a culture. It's like my partner has to be the best at sex, the best at cooking, a co-parent, a provider, like all of, super great with my friends and family. Like there's a lot of pressure to be absolutely everything for one person,
and also a lot of pressure to appreciate and love that person in that way. So many times we might feel it as a betrayal if I feel like, oh, you like that person in that way more than you do me, maybe just today. Then it's like, wait, you're not supposed to do that. That's you're supposed to like me the best. And all these insecurities underneath that. And one thing that we found is really useful to shift of perspective is to more look at, actually, our connection just is of value because of its uniqueness, not because I'm the best at everything and you see me in that way every moment of every day, but actually in the same way that your connection with anyone else you meet is unique. Actually, there's something that's unique about our space, and I can, in a way, rely more on that if I want to try and take a sense of feeling special or feeling self-worth from our connection. It's like, well, there's nothing out there quite like ours. I say that a bit hesitantly because it also for me is a little bit wobbly ground to try and be like, where can I sort of my hungry ghost find this sense of self-worth? Like there must be something that's only ours out of this thing. So it's probably best not to come at that from this desperate place. But there is something about, we can use this feeling that comes up as a gateway to just appreciating, actually, like I am my own unique person. Our connection is unique, and that's something I can appreciate.
and even if I'm not a rock star, I'm still valuable. Our connection is still magical, and I think that is a really great way of that's a really great lens through which you can also look at yourself. It's like, I'm valid just by virtue of existing, just by virtue of being me and being alive now in a human body. Like I don't need to be the best at absolutely everything to be so worthy and so welcome. And I feel like that's an opportunity that jealousy provides us. It's like, not only is our connection unique, but I'm also unique and worthy.
Yeah, absolutely.
So not only can we touch the very depths of our unworthiness and make friends with those, we can also be reminded of our absolute worthiness at the same time. So many gifts.
So as a side note, for my own journey with jealousy, especially when I was younger, in my late teens and early 20s in relationships, I was like insanely jealous quite a lot of the time. And even the mention from partners of previous people that they'd been with, if they had like intimate physical contact with, could just send me into this spiral of shame about not being good enough. It was weird, like, and I knew it was weird at the time, but it's like there wasn't anything I could do about it, and it was quite a long journey through that. just developing more self-worth by doing everything that's involved in life, really, like coming more into myself, being more honest about who I am, just getting out there in the world, that like everything about becoming a more integrated human has definitely helped me on this journey.
Yeah. And I think it's so relatable because, as we've kind of been saying, like, we all carry this stuff around about not being enough, and depending on your parenting, depending on so many factors from when you were growing up, like, that's going to be more or less pronounced. And then you can pile on top of that, onto the shit sandwich, the I'm getting on my soapbox. The fact that our culture so often behaves as though your partner being at all interested in any other person is like this huge betrayal. Like so many films and songs that really tug at our emotions and our heart space are really based around this idea that, like, cheating on your partner, or even thinking about cheating on your partner, is like,
even just feeling attraction towards another person.
Right? Even the word cheating, it's like the biggest betrayal ever, right?
Yeah,
like it's this huge like,
you're damned
weapon,
for forever if
you've done the worst thing imaginable. Whereas if we look at the statistics, like, a lot of people, most people, I would say, are attracted to people who aren't their partner. I think that's pretty normal.
But why do we do that? I think the reason we do that is very telling of just how much pain we feel around this stuff, how dependent we can be on our partners, and also how much we like to squash that and deny it. Because the only reason, as far as I can see, for this condemning of another person for just experiencing something that was completely out of their control, like looking at another person, feeling attracted to them.
How many times have you chosen to be attracted to somebody?
Right. Like, the only reason that we would blame someone for that is to avoid our own sense of pain and what it brings up in us.
Yeah. And so I guess my journey with this is I was in a, like, pretty happy, stable, loving relationship from quite a young age. Like, when I was a teenager, I really fell deeply in love, and I had this very sweet, very connected experience. And then I got into a different relationship with an older guy, and he was the most jealous person I've ever met. Like, he had a super fucked up life in lots of ways, and he had a lot of pain and a lot of jealousy, and he was kind of jealous of my friends, jealous of my mum, of anyone who wasn't him, basically, and who I spent time with or cared about, and made me crazy jealous too. Like, by jealousy via osmosis or something. I was just like, yeah, fuck your co-workers, and like I felt it made me feel so uncomfortable and so sad and so unstable, that I became really, really jealous, and that was a real signpost for me at the time. I mean, I didn't really have the awareness of self that I have now, but it was a real warning flag for me of, like, who have I become? Like, what's going on for me now? And that was, like, ultimately one of the first steps to realizing that relationship was really not for me anymore.
I think in a way it also projected you in a direction of doing whatever you could to avoid jealousy in future relationships.
So
right?
much.
And in some ways, the if I understand it right, the intention you took on with that and some of the things it manifested were not actually totally healthy.
No, surprise. Totally. That's a really good point. I came out of that relationship and I was like, right, jealousy, never ever again. I'm transcending jealousy. I'm making the decision. Spoiler alert, didn't go so well. I kind of ended up in a much looser, more less committed, sort of polyamorous, I guess, situation of just like being much more casual with the people I was spending time with, not really making commitments and pretending that I was completely fine with them seeing other people, and really squashing the jealousy down inside of myself. That's
the point, right? Because not that we feel like there's anything wrong with casual connections,
absolutely
or
not,
anything, but if in order to be there that you're squashing what's real for you and what's authentic to you, ultimately as a way to try and avoid the jealousy in the first place, then it's probably not going to lead to the happiest.
Yeah, that's a really key point, because I think, in my experience at least, jealousy can exist in every kind of relationship. Jealousy can exist in the parent-child relationship. It can exist within friendships. It can exist within monogamous, lifelong commitments, and it can exist within really, really casual, like one night flings, right? Totally. Like it's kind of a universal human experience. And I am not here to say that any one of those connections is more valid or less valid. Like, that's really not the point of what we're sharing. But what is valid is how you come into relationship with your feelings, and how much you show up with those, with the person that you're in relationship to.
And what we're advocating for is bringing it into the relationship.
Bring it in. Bring it all in.
Denying it, not squashing it down and saying, okay, this is a part of who we are as people, what we experience, and therefore it's got to be part of what we bring into relationship. And we've got to have an understanding that the other person's going to feel that, we're going to feel that. And so it needs to be shared and acknowledged and not ran away from.
Yeah.
The other thing, just to tag on the end of that, is, and I've definitely experienced myself doing this, and it's made me very uncomfortable in the past, is what my own jealousy can lead to in terms of attempts to control the other person. This came up in the workshop we were doing quite a few times as well. And I think it's reflective of this relationship you were talking about, that you're on the receiving end of. And I guess for me, that's just another signpost of, actually, when I don't tend to what's coming up in terms of my own needs through this jealousy, and use that as a signpost towards, okay, what do I need? What do I need to give myself? What do I need to create between our connection in order to soothe that? Actually, again, I guess in the case you were just talking about, it led to a kind of running away and abandoning of that emotion, and trying to do what you could to avoid it. Another route, and certainly one that I've taken before, is it kind of comes from that blame of the other person, and then subtle attempts to kind of coerce that person and chop them down in some way. Because actually, if you're out living your best life and shining, and people love you for that and connecting with that, maybe it makes a part of me feel insecure. And if I'm not bringing that in a healthy way into our connection, then it might be the another part of me wants to somehow, like, just point out your faults or your failures to make you feel like less, to make me feel better about myself, which is really ugly. And obviously, like, I could feel a lot of shame around that. But yeah, for me, the solution just lies in being honest, acknowledging actually what's underneath that attempt to manipulate, that I feel insecure and I feel wounded, and it's maybe really vulnerable for me to admit that to myself and to admit it in relationship, but it's the only way that I can both start a process of healing for myself, but also the only way I can really set you free to live your best life and not try and cut you down.
Yeah, I mean, it requires, I think, quite a lot of self-awareness to notice these ways in which we're kind of trying to control and police our partners. But I think as soon as you do become aware of it, it's our responsibility to be like, shit, where's that coming from? Why am I trying to do that? And then to bring it in, to share it, to get it out there.
Yeah, as ugly as it might be. And I feel like the more we do that, the easier it becomes.
So much.
And it can almost be funny. It's like, oh yeah, like when I saw you like being really vivacious and lively the other day, there was a part of me that kind of wanted to make a sarcastic joke to make you feel a bit worse about yourself. It's quite ugly, but it's like the more we can just acknowledge it and recognize, oh yeah, like we're humans, we have those urges, and speak them, actually it takes the charge away from them a lot.
Absolutely. And the more we learn to share these things, the more we learn to make space for, hold space for, and share these things, the sort of easier the process becomes. And the easier it becomes to feel what's going on, to get in touch with the deeper stuff, and then and to connect. Like, my therapist said something great this week. He said something like, there's only so long you can be afraid of something that doesn't kill you. So
Okay.
the more
It's
that
gotta
you're
burn out
able to
eventually.
face that fear and face that discomfort, the more your brain kind of recognizes like, okay,
Yeah.
this is all right.
Yeah, so we're talking about exposure, which kind of brings on another point in jealousy. Really, for us, is that fear of I'll be abandoned if I see you connecting with someone else at its core. Another method, I guess, in the mix of this is the more I can expose myself to that consciously, so that I can share, be honest with myself, be honest with you, of, oh, this is what I'm feeling when I see you connecting with another person, then hopefully each time that takes a little bit of the charge off, because it's like, oh, I go to that, I have this deep fear that I experience on that core, raw sort of level. Oh, I'm afraid of being abandoned. I really, take that in. I feel that. I give myself some soothing. And then maybe next time or 3 or 4 times down the line, my brain eventually starts to figure out like, oh, I'm not actually being abandoned here. And I expose myself to that situation again and again and again. And it's like, oh, I don't actually have to hold on to that fear. If what is driving the fear in the moment is abandonment, and it keeps not happening, then actually I'm going to feel more and more okay about it.
So, yeah, I think it's really normal to and incredibly understandable to want to transcend and never feel jealousy again.
And also another thing that can happen on that subject is just in the moment, like rather than this big project of like I want to like wrestle it to the ground and squash it and then never feel it again. Also in the moment there can be an attempt to avoid the feeling as a coping strategy, which might actually be quite useful. Like if you're feeling so much intensity that it's leading you into overwhelm, distraction techniques can be useful.
Yeah, totally. And or if you're in a situation where you don't actually have the time or the space to sit and be with it and feel into it, it's completely legit to distract yourself.
But as well as that, we like to approach it that in general, if we have the capacity and we have the space to do it, we prefer the idea of really coming into relationship with these feelings. So a lot of the time people will give the advice that I guess this is more in circles of polyamory or open relationships. If your partner is going off on a date with someone else, then make sure you're busy. Make sure you're going out to see friends.
Or that you're also on a date.
You're also on a date. You're going out to a movie. You're doing something, so you're not just at home
stewing.
thinking about stewing. And of course, stewing and like plunging yourself into a hole of like shame and feeling terrible, also not a good idea. But yeah, we definitely advocate, if you have the capacity for it, using whatever's coming up as a way to come more into relationship with yourself and get to know yourself can be a super powerful way to do it. Yeah. So we don't recommend like automatically going to that place of like, oh, uncomfortable feelings.
Busy.
How can
Get
I
busy.
Get away
Clean
from
the oven. And I think this is really good life lessons for other intense emotion as well. I've heard so often when a friend is grieving and the end of a partnership, the kind of popular advice often tends to be like, right, well, get busy, like dive into your work and go to the gym loads. And I think those are like, there's nothing wrong with those in themselves, but if they're meaning that you never actually touch the bottom of your own grief and your sorrow, you're just robbing yourself of bringing those deeper, darker places of yourself into the fold and integrating those and knowing who you are on that level. Yeah,
because it's an opportunity, isn't it? It's like, and it's not that easy sometimes to create those opportunities of being in touch with those vulnerable, raw spaces. And whilst it's very understandable once they pop up to feel like, oh, actually, I'm not so sure I want to be in relationship to you. It's good to remember that actually, like, they don't come around every day necessarily, and so when it's there, it's a really good chance to be like, okay, like, let's get to know this part, let's feel into it, let's bring it some love and attention and soothing.
Absolutely.
There's one other thing I wanted to add. Continuity error. This is a different day to when we were originally recording.
We're coming to you from the future.
Our jealousy video. But there was one other thing that I remembered and sort of half stole from someone else's video on jealousy as well, that I remembered for me has been a really good point in dealing with jealousy in my own life, which I haven't told you about yet what it is, have I?
Heavens, no.
Let's see what your response is.
Live and unfiltered.
So the point was, as much as we've been talking about self-acceptance and self-love in context of jealousy, there's also a thing which I've definitely experienced, which has been really useful in seeing quality in another person reflected that maybe makes me feel inferior in some way or inadequate. Actually, sometimes it can be actually genuinely useful and humbling and much more peaceful to say, hey, that person's actually really good at that thing, and maybe I want to be better at doing that in myself, whatever that is. If they're very, I don't know, like they talk really well, or they're confident, or something like this. And that sometimes, for me, what can get really grindy is if internally I'm trying to put them down and be like, no, look at them, they're like slimy, they're like
they're not so good at talking.
Yeah, they're like just really like,
fuck that guy, what does he know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like I might put it in the context of he's really arrogant, he's just talking all the time and he thinks he's really great. And actually there's something in, if I just admit to myself, actually, like there's some qualities there, maybe they're not manifesting exactly as I would like to see them in myself, or maybe they are, but there's some qualities there that actually I feel could be developed more in myself. That actually makes me feel a lot more peaceful with it then, in admitting that, but it's quite, it's quite a humbling thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, it really harks back to what we were saying before, I think, about that thing of like often jealousy is a real signpost to something we want more of. It's it's coming from a very similar place.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and I think also if your way of coping with your emotions, your uncomfortable emotions, and bolstering your own sense of like self-worth or self-compassion relies on belittling or squashing at what anyone else is doing.
Bit of a warning sign.
Yeah, right. Like that's probably not the most sustainable thing. I've like most of what I've learnt about self-worth and self-love is that it comes from the inside.
Yeah.
And when it's real, it doesn't need to squash or like piss on anyone else's parade.
So if those things are happening, yeah, it might be bit of a warning bell of like, oh, okay, what are we denying in ourselves in terms of feelings? If that's jealousy or admiration even, which is a hard thing to admit to someone that you're wanting to like belittle in some way, that
Absolutely.
Actually I think you might be quite good at that thing.
But isn't this like basically exactly what everyone's mum told them when they were getting bullied? Do you remember when they were little?
What was that?
They're just jealous, darling. They're just jealous. Maybe mum was right. Maybe we are just...
we're all doing that in some way.
All doing that in some... Well, maybe, yeah. I mean, this is where we get into the definition of envy and jealousy, isn't it? A little bit. Of someone having something you want rather than someone taking something you have.
Is that the definition?
That's what that guy in our workshop said.
Yeah, I'm not so interested in definitions of words. Maybe you are.
Maybe you are.
Maybe you
Let
are.
us know.
I'm not. I might edit this video to end before. Anyway, thanks for watching.
Thank you so much. Let us know what you thought.
Yes.
And have a lovely day.
Have a lovely day.